Hi, I'm Mike Henry, and this is my Procreate 4.3 demo for the piece I call A Tale of Two Brothers. So here's yet another sketch that I did a long time ago. You'll see a blip on the screen for just a quick second here, and I decided that it'd be fun to paint up. I did it like 8 years ago, and I was going through a bunch of sketchbooks and photos and stuff when I found it. Problem that we've been having, of course, with these videos has been the dropping of the time-lapse file. That problem, though, of course, becomes a positive because I'll do a deep dive on the Procreate file so that I can make sure that you get all of the information, and in some ways that actually proves a little bit more valuable. So unfortunately, this video is going to capture through the ambient occlusion pass, and then it basically just like drops. So we'll be going through a lot of stuff. Right now, it's just the flattening process. I'm using the turpentine brush, as I've been doing a lot lately, and we're just going through and painting each section. As you see me paint it, based on how the shape is sort of cut out, I think you can understand quite a bit what my layer setup is like. You'll also see that, of course, when we go through the actual file. You can see I go through every single one of them, so I think that'll be exciting. Now, when I did this piece, the original drawing is super weird. Well, I shouldn't say super weird, but it's pretty weird, and so I wanted to do something that was speaking to that in the colors, which is why you see me right off the bat painting him as blue. He ends up being purple with yellow hair on a yellow background with yellow clothing, but he does go through a handful of colors as this thing goes on because I just wanted to try and find something that would be fun. By the way, I knew right here using purple and green that was already going to feel kind of jokery, so I just decided to keep going with the flatting because I knew I would change it in a minute. And in a second, I even changed the face to a purple that's more like this is going to go from Joker animated to Joker like Cesar Romero, Batman 66 Joker, but eventually we get away from that, of course, as an overall piece. So the idea here was just to have fun with those colors, see how it was going to look, and yeah. But then once I completed it, I thought it'd be fun to just do a normal version of the guy. So that's why we have two versions here. We've got essentially brothers. One is a little more radioactive than the other, but they love each other, and the normal one has stood up for the weird one ever since they were kids. And I have a whole book written about it. I don't actually have a whole book written about it, but you can imagine how that book would be. It'd be pretty stereotypical. But the rest of this is kind of by the book process. It's painting in all of the flats, then using Select Paint, Select Clear, which is a method linked down below, to go through and paint the ambient occlusion pass, then a new shadow layer, and the same process happening, and then the additional things like bounce light or basically just kind of bounce light and some reflection and things like that. It's pretty standard as far as these pieces go if you followed me up until this point. This one was kind of more of a relax and do something fun type piece, just because every now and then you just need to enjoy creating something without worrying about whether or not you're pushing yourself too hard. It's good to sort of, in the aggregate, always be trying to seek growth and push yourself a little bit harder, but that you don't have to be doing it constantly. It doesn't have to be like a militant exercise about self-improvement. Sometimes it can just be for fun. So that's what this one was. That's what the last one was, the old guy that was excited about something. And then we'll see some crazier ones later, but this was just in the spirit of taking it easy, having some fun. See some crazy colors going in. You can see I've just got lots of colors. At one point I just thought like, yeah, what if I just had like all the colors just to see what that would look like. And while there's just like kind of a fun, goofy, crazy vibe to that, I wanted it to be a little bit more controlled, so I started exploring with what that control looks like. First by making the background red also, which means then his main body would be a part of that. You saw it blip for just a second there, but then I started going like, okay, well yeah, actually maybe having it all be a similar color would be kind of cool, and that's where we get with this yellow scheme that of course complements the purple, and it just works out pretty nicely. I think that it's obviously, not an illustration for everyone. I think that it's just kind of, it's loud colors for the sake of loud colors, which I guess maybe for that person then who doesn't like it, the normal one is better. But I just wanted it to be kind of just weird, I guess. I had just come off of doing the Tifa piece, and then I did the old guy, and those were both, like, Tifa was just more complex than the old guy, but kind of still standard, and then the old guy was just like a pure relax, have fun, skin tones, and that's it kind of piece, and so that's why this one goes a little bit more bonkers. Soon we're going to be done with the flatting process, and we're going to move into the ambient occlusion pass, and then that's when the whole thing is going to like drop out. So we'll jump into actually going through the file at that point. So here we are at the ambient occlusion pass. This is done with a light red-brown set to multiply, as a lot of the pieces recently have been, and I'm just going in and laying it in with the turpentine brush, and then using the turpentine brush as a smudge tool to smudge it and soften it. The ambient occlusion should be on the softer side, but then when we get to the hard shadow, it just gets laid in very sharply. Of course, we're not going to see that happening in real time due to the time lapse crapping out on us, but we will go through that in the file breakdown. So I'm moving through all of the layers, doing the usual thing. I'm thinking about where the light is going to be blocked the most by the objects around the object that's getting painted. So if I'm working on the shirt, it's like, okay, well, the light is going to get in behind the tie and in the curve of the collar less than it's going to in other areas. So that's where I'm applying some of that soft shadowing and where it gets darkest. I'm also using this mostly, that's why in the past, instead of calling it just like a straight ambient occlusion shadow, I've been calling it a form shadow, because I'm also using it when I want to add structure to the figure, whether it's on his sweater, shirt, face, hair, whatever it is. I'm using that as a way to say, okay, let's define some of this geometry, and then when the other shadow layer comes over this, we'll have that geometry defined. Another way that geometry gets further fleshed out is through the bounce light that gets thrown on later. occlusion pass is ending and the shadows would get thrown in, but instead, because of the way the file captured, it just jumps to when I'm doing the tweaks on the flats, and you'll see everything, all these layers just sort of get turned back on, and we'll explain why that's so easy to do with this type of a file setup in the file. So right here we've reached the background will change, and that is the final version of the normal guy, and then here is the final version of the purple guy. But let's dive into the actual file and see what's going on here. Okay, so here we have Pormal Man is the name of this folder, because inside it is Purple Man and Normal Man. Now, Purple Man was the original version of this, and then I made the normal guy after because I just thought it'd be fun to see what he looked like normal. So let's go into purple first so that we can see how this one is all laid out. Okay, we've got the drawing on top set to multiply just so that I can see it while I'm working on it. And then let's start turning everything off. Okay, that's too much. Okay, cool. So here are the flats. You can see, let's look at the background first because it's really quick. We have these just little white marks in the background, which is set to a soft light white with a low opacity. You can see right there. And I'm just, going through and hatching away, and that's what's giving us that look. And then there's also a layer that's normal, that is just a normal white with a lower opacity, and that's for the outline. So since that's done, that's the simplest part to go through, let's take a look at the flats. The flats are also very simple because this is overall a simple piece. We have the mustache flats on top, and then whatever flat this is. What is that? I'm like turning it on and off. Oh, there we go. It's the eyelashes. Let's get the layer up here. Eyelashes. Okay, now that I realize what in the eyes, let's look through that. We have the irises. We have the sclera. There is no eye meat in this one. We have the teeth and the tongue and gums on a layer. And then we have the mouth hole. Technical terms, of course. Then we have the sort of blush, but since he's like purple, it's a different color. It's more of a purpley, it's like a bluer purple, and then the skin is more of a red purple. And then we have the 5 o'clock shadow, which is done in 2 layers. We have a blue that's there for color, and if we make that 100%, you can see it's literally just blue, slightly green. And then we have a noise layer on top of that. And I'll show how to do that separately. Then we have just the darkening around the eyes, which is a multiply layer. And it's probably purpley, a little bit. It's mostly gray, actually. This one is pretty gray. When it's a normal person, it's more purple usually. Then just the skin, the hair. So you can see the skin is cut out so that the hairline is correct on the skin layer. Then we have his distant ear. I have this other ear sort of like behind the hair so that it's just in the distance. And then we've got his sweater, tie in all of its various layers, and then shirt. Very simple. There's no surprises here with the way that this is laid out. I think the more surprising thing is just simply the color choice, and that's what gives us some visual interest here. So on the next layers, let's turn them all on. You can see a ton changes, so let's go through those one by one. We have our sort of ambient occlusion layer here, which is soft. The shadow layer is, let's turn on this one so we can see it more easily. That's the color of my shadow layer, and then it's set to multiply. And that's the same thing with the ambient occlusion one, which, as I explained previously, that's just done by painting it in with the turpentine brush and then smudging it with the turpentine brush until it is soft, like I would like it to be. And then this layer is just the harder shadow from the cast light, which the cast light is sort of coming from the left and a little high, but not much. Then we have our bounce light, which is coming from off screen. It's more of just a reflection. It's not like a hard rim light, and it's this blue, which if it goes up to 100%, you can see it's quite blue. And this here is some bounce lighting on his ear, right there. And then this is just like bounce pass all around. So if we look through it, you can see his mustache bouncing onto his skin right there. Oh, it looks like I have a stray dot happening here. That's funny. I did not notice that. Got a little bit of bounce on his neck roll right there. And then I believe there's some in his hair. Yes. Here his hair is bouncing onto his hair. The light part is bouncing onto the dark part. And you can see some skin bouncing onto the hair and some spots as well. Okay, so it's sort of just going through and trying to find all the opportunities for where bounce can happen and sticking that in there. Next we have some bounce of his skin onto his eyes. You can also see we've already got that blue bounce on his eyes from when that blue pass happened. So then this is just getting in there and adding more reflectivity in his eyes. This is a saturated transition. You can barely see it on the skin, but it's there, right here where the shadow transitions. And then we have this, which is just the shine for his hair. You can see that all over, which is just a color. You can see there that it's 100% opacity, so it's just a picked color. And then here's just a bunch of under lighting, like a bounce coming from down below, just to give a little bit of extra dimension to his hair. Last, we leave that folder and we get into these extra shines. So here we have some reflection, you can see right there, and then an actual shine, and then that's duplicated and blurred just to make sure that looks as hot and brilliant as it should. Last but not least, the signature. So that's him. So now from there, the easiest thing is going to be explaining the other files. So let's go ahead and do that. Here we have the regular version of the character. So what needed to change? What did I need to do with this to make it the more normal looking dude? Well, it was actually super easy. Almost all of these layers are reactive. Some of them are not, which had to be manually adjusted, but most of them are. And so I'll show that by, instead of really going through this again, because I'd be going through the exact same stuff, I'll just show you how it works by making him yet another color. So just to keep this really simple, let's make the background gray. And so by making it gray, you can already see that the background effects changed as well, because those are also reactive. They're either a lowered opacity or they're set to something like a soft light. And now let's turn off all of our lighting for a minute and just deal with our flats. At least that's the way I like to go about doing this. In fact, let's take the signature and desaturate that as well so that it matches the background. There we go, boom. Okay, so if we go into our flats now and we take his skin and we make it another crazy color, right? So we had purple before, let's go with like a blue. Really saturate that thing so that we can make it look very, very different, right? And then let's make his hair, since we're going with this like gray look, we could kind of desaturate the hair and make it, let's make it slightly purple, a little darker even. Sure, why not? And what do we have here still to adjust? His ear, his back ear. Okay, there's that. Wait, it can go a little more blue. There we go. There's that. And then let's go ahead and leave the ear and nose and stuff blush where it's at, because that's probably fine. With his mustache is going to have to be more or less the same color as his hair, but let's make it darker, just a little darker. Keep it a little on the purple side. There we go. And his eyes, just to make it exciting, kind of. Let's give him some orangey yellow eyes. That sort of like fits. That plays nicely off of his now blue skin. And last but not least, just to make sure that this all feels like we are changing everything, we can change his shirt to whatever we want it to be. Let's make it like a grayish, green, blue, super desaturated thing like that. His tie should go darker, I think, and really desaturated. Bring it over to the blue realm of things. You can't see the blue realm. There we go. Let's actually saturate that up. There we go. I'm going to just merge his tie layers so that we can make this quick here and make them an overlay. Actually, let's not make them an overlay. Let's make the... Can we do something quick that isn't multiply? Ugh, it's still not great. Let's get those over to the blue. Okay, let's call that good. That's not good, but let's call that good. And then last but not least, his sweater. Yeah, sure, perfect. Okay, cool. So we've got him completely shifted around. His mouth is still basically the color of like a normal human mouth, but like whatever. Let's just leave it as it is. What happens when we just go ahead and turn these layers back on? More or less everything looks fine. There are some things that don't look fine that we have to go in and manually adjust, but this is one of the key reasons why you would use reactive layers like multiplies or overlays or something like that, is that most of the time you then don't have to adjust anything. So what do we have to adjust? Well, if I was actively working on this, I would probably know exactly all the layers. So instead, we're just going to have to go through them one by one and see what needs to be adjusted, which should be pretty quick actually. So his ambient occlusion layers and his core shadow layers, those are rarely the ones that need to be adjusted. This layer that's emphasizing this bounce light, it actually doesn't need to be adjusted. However, since we made him blue and it's a blue bounce light, it's less interesting now. So maybe it's time that we find something else to do. So here, let me reset this and take it to full opacity. Excuse me. What's a good thing that'll play off of this? Yeah, something like that. And then let's lower the opacity all the way to 0 and bring it up just a little. There we go, that's kind of nice. That's giving him some of that extra definition that lighting can provide. There are some areas where I would probably change this a little bit, like for instance here on his collar. It's not as soft as I would probably like it, because now that we've changed to a different color, it's reacting differently and it's coming on a little strong, and I don't really want it to be quite that strong. But just for the sake of this demo, we'll more or less call that good. And by the way, I'm just going in here with the smudge tool set to turpentine and just, you know, messing with it a little bit. Here's a great example. Since we made that hair darker, that starts getting a lot messier. And now we need to come in here and take care of it just a little bit. Okay, good enough for now. That's explaining the point. Then we had that bounce before on his ear. Boom. Problem is, his ear's not that color anymore, his hair's not that color anymore, so we need to adjust this. So let's make it the blue that it is, but it's really desaturated, and let's darken it a little, because it's not as bouncy as it was before. So that's fairly okay, just for this quick demo. This is the harder layer. I put all of these together on a layer, and it's really just me going through and checking like the bounce across everything, so this isn't in as good a shape as the other ones. So for this one, what I would do is come in here and I would select everything that I thought was the skin bounce. Whoop. Everything that I thought was the skin bounce. So that's this, and then that's this. Actually, just to check. Yeah, okay, it's just that. Cool. And then that's it for the skin, right? I mean, this, I guess, was the skin. Cool. So now we have to color shift all of that to the blue that we're working with now. Cool, that's done. Now this was bounce from the hair. And this was bouncing from the inside of his own hair as well. And that's it. So now we'll color shift that to be more of what it is, although it is a much darker hair now, so I don't know how much would actually bounce from that, but there you go. So that just adjusted that. So we're more or less okay. I think the shirt's fine for the purposes of the demo. I think you get the point. Next is the bounce on his eyes. You can see that this is set to be that color, which certainly he is not that color. So let's make that blue. I saturated it up a bit. It's a little strong, but that's good. That way it can still be seen. And then we've got the rich color here, this hot color. I would actually just shift that away. Probably over like a green. And take it down just a little bit. It's a little strong. Okay, that's not perfect, especially on the nose there. So I would also have to adjust that. And what are we on? The last one's the hair shines. The hair shines actually kind of work a decent amount, just to make sure that we're being as accurate as possible. I'll bring them more purple. And then we've got the bounce light. The bounce light is basically white that's been desaturated, or excuse me, lowered in opacity. So I'll just lower that a little bit more. And there we go. So we have a different version of this character. That's one of the main reasons why you would use these types of layers, so that you can make adjustments very, very easily. It's really good, especially in a studio environment where you might be trying to figure out what the color of something should be, like a character or a vehicle or something like that. And you might have an art director come up and say, oh, that looks great, but can we try it in this color instead? Instead of having to do some layer effects or some sort of adjustments or repaint something, you can do something like this and you have more control over it. So that's it for the deep dive on this file. That allows you there to see we've now got 3 versions of this character, and you could do as many as you wanted basically without messing with your lighting too badly. And so let's take one last look at the final version of Normal Guy and the final version of Purple Guy. 2 brothers just living life. So thank you very much for watching. Let's take a slow pan across these just so you can see any of the details that you want to see. So thanks for watching. Please consider liking and subscribing if you did enjoy the video, or if you've enjoyed any of the others, and I will see you on the next one. And if you're looking for me on the internet, these are the places where you can find me.